All right, well, we're back for another watercolor demo video, but before I start into the painting, I wanted to talk about this painting in that, lots of times when you see these demos on YouTube, it just looks like they're machines. They just pump this stuff out, and it's, watercolor's not easy, and so sometimes we don't see this, but I wanted to share this with you guys because I did this painting 3 times. I recorded it 3 times. The one that I'm going to show you now is what I think closest to what I was shooting for. So that's this painting, and I still wasn't satisfied with this. After the video, I went back and I added a few little touches here because I didn't like how this came up and just broke real close to the edge. So, but I'll show you the other ones. This was the second version. I never went any further than this. What I decided to try, well, you know what, let's do this. Let's do the first version. So this is the first version. And I thought, well, I'm gonna use a lot more gouache, which is opaque watercolor, to do a lot of this. And I just felt like it got too heavy, and it just wasn't the softness, that atmospheric quality that I wanted. So I decided to, do it again. And this time I thought, well, I'll do a more detailed drawing and do a lot of reverse painting around all the snow on here. And what that ended up creating is a lot of edges that, now I could have gone back in and worked on those, and I just didn't have the patience to do it. I still didn't get the feeling that I wanted from this. So I just stopped the video, and we did it again. And I think that this one I feel stronger about, just because I was able to use the wet into wet the way that I originally intended, that I thought I would do. And it's just a little bit softer, a little more better atmosphere, and the gouache is kind of minimal, and it's a lot more subtle. And so I wanted to share that with you, just so that you guys know that it doesn't always it's not always as easy as it looks. And if you're doing watercolor, you certainly know that. So I appreciate you tuning in. Let's get to the video. Okay, so this is my 3rd time that I've drawn this, and I decided after doing the first couple drawings that I think I did better when I had less. And so sometimes, generally I would tell my students, draw as much as you can, because you can always just ignore it but it's better to have more than less, so that you're not kind of on your own trying to figure out how to paint an area. Whenever you're in that position, draw more, break up that bigger shape into a smaller shape. It just makes things a little easier. In this case, I think that because the background is so busy, but I wanted a kind of a softness there, and I didn't want to overdo it. And sometimes when you have all that information in front of you, you just feel almost an obligation to put more brushwork in than you really need. So I kept it pretty basic, just the main shapes, the main trees. And as far as color, it's you can see the colors listed there. This is just repeated pretty much over and over again, these same mixes. Sometimes they're a little earthier, sometimes they have a little violet cast, or maybe more blue. But these colors that you're seeing there, those are the colors that are going to be repeated over and over and over again. So I started with a wet into wet, and I mean really make it wet. If you're going to do that, make sure that you thoroughly, end to end, evenly wet the paper, because then you're not surprised when you have an area that dries ahead of some other area. So there's a little bit of warmth in the sky. You can hardly see in the photo. There's not that much sky showing, but it's a little bit warmer, and so I probably made it warmer than it is, just because I had this vision of what this painting is going to look like. So and this is just a classic wet into wet, and I brought that color that I'm thinking that the sky is going to be warm, and that usually will reflect somehow onto the snow, and so that's why I got those warm washes down on the snow. Remember, with wet into wet, you're going to lose a lot of value, and so I knew that as this dries, it's going to get lighter, and lighter and lighter. And there's nothing more frustrating than doing the best wet into wet. Say you're doing a sky, and you do this amazing wet into wet sky, and then it dries, and it's like all that amazingness is just really subtle, you know. So you want to make sure that you put in enough pigment and compensate. I don't know what the difference is in drying, what, 20%, 25%? I mean, I would just be making something up. But so you know, I just try to make sure that I get enough pigment in there. Since the background has so many limbs and everything, I'm just, you know, putting some brushwork in and allowing it to move around. Maybe you know, it's starting to dry now, so that the marks that I put in don't move as much. And so it's still damp, obviously, you can see. And so instead of using, you know, I tried to do the reverse painting one time, and then I used a lot of gouache, and I didn't like that. And so this time I thought, well, the gouache is still slightly damp, just take a wet brush and try to lift some of this paint out to represent sort of snow-covered limbs and things. And I wasn't being, you know, I didn't do a real detailed drawing, so I'm just sort of, you know, improvising with the brush. And those real fine limbs, that's just a drippy brush, so that extra water basically is pushing out the paint. And so in a way, that's kind of like, you know, how sometimes when you're doing a wash and that happens and you don't want it to happen, and it creates a bloom or a blossom. But here we want that to happen. We want the water that we're putting down to push out the paint that is on the surface. And so it's a great way to bring in a lighter area in combination with, you know, using a sponge or a paper towel, something to lift off some of this. And so I don't know, I felt better about that this time, that it was just softer. It wasn't, you know, like when I did the reverse painting, I thought that was too harsh. And so, you know, cobalt blue is the main blue and that's, you'll see that, like if you look at my other videos, I use that color almost all the time. I mean, it's probably my favorite color, because it's not a real, you know, it's a standard blue that doesn't lean warm or it doesn't lean cool, and it mixes very nicely. It's gets along with all the other colors and stuff. So it's a really great mixing color. And for snow scenes, then it becomes sort of my base for shadows. And depending on the light, sometimes then you would bring in a manganese, which is a cooler blue, or you bring in a touch of phthalo, which obviously is cooler. And so, and then ultramarine is very warm. And so some of these places where the shadows are deeper here, it's going to be definitely a warmer blue. The background, now that the paper is dry, I can go back in and create real subtle, like anything in the background now I'm thinking of just being like subtle edges and nothing real contrasty. And you see that's just the same colors repeated. The ratios change a little bit. That's the difference is, you know, sometimes it's a little more yellow, sometimes a little more of an earth tone, like the quinceanna. This is the stream. This is a bend on this stream. I've painted this a few times in different seasons, and at this time that I took this photo, it was mostly frozen over. And so this is just that real thin ice that is on top of the water. And I wanted it to be, you know, in a way ice acts just like snow does, or water, and it's reflective of its environment. And so you see it's the same, pretty much the same colors as the background. As it moves to the left, it gets deeper. And so that's just ultramarine blue brought in just into that wash. And just trying to, you know, basically it's just a simple shape, reverse painted. So we're creating the snow by creating the stream shape. The dark tree here is just a lot of earth tone, so it's, you know, a little bit warm. I don't generally paint my trees brown because they aren't usually brown that much, but I knew that, you know, there is a little bit of warmth there, so it has a slight warm feeling to it. So this becomes a really important brush for this painting, and that's just one of those little Asian calligraphy brushes, you know, a little bamboo handle, and it's like a rigger. And so it's great for linear stuff, but I really like it for using it on its side and getting, see those marks? See, those are so cool to me. They're real broken and jagged, and you can't control them, and it just is so interesting, especially if you're doing landscape for the edges of trees, backgrounds, maybe inside of a tree where there's foliage. Just using the side of the brush to create washes that have these jagged, uncontrolled edges, I think makes things really interesting. The standard dark for this painting and many of mine is just Van Dyke brown and ultramarine blue, and so that's what I'm using for these, for the trees that are darker here, the smaller trees. And so I did have, I've lifted some of what I thought would, like, where the snow would be on top there, but I wasn't being real tight about it. And so it's just an approximation of that. And I try to follow it a little bit, but for the most part, it's just these are just calligraphic marks. And I don't want to go crazy with it. I don't want to make it too dense. In the photo, there's lots of them. I mean, you can look, and there's just so many limbs and stuff back there. But I was trying to, and that's what watercolor is. We're just approximating. We're just suggesting busyness back there. And so there's just a few that are defined, which are these. And just, putting them in and then suggesting the rest of those marks and using, some sort of dry brush back there and some really broken kind of brushwork, I think gets away with suggesting it. And I think that's why I didn't care for the one that I did a lot of reverse painting by, because I was creating just so many edges. And I think I probably could have made it work. I could have gone in and just kept softening and lifting and softening. But it seemed like, gee, there's got to be an easier way to do it than that. And so that's why we're on to our third version here. And so it's, I can still see some of my drawing just enough. And it's, that's important. That's why you want to make sure that you draw dark enough that you can see any of your guidelines that you have there. Oftentimes we're kind of told to draw a lot lighter, and we end up losing our drawing, and then we're kind of on our own. Here, I knew I wasn't going to get real dark, so my drawing actually wasn't that dark. This tree just needs to be a little bit richer, and so that's that same mix that I used on the smaller trees. And then here's a little bit of dry brush in the background. There were a couple little areas where the ice had a different look. It was maybe it was more snow than it was ice, and so that's what I was painting on the edges there. This is open water, and I really like the reflection when I just have the tree reflected and the small tree reflected in that water. For some reason, I go back and on the left side of that open water, on the left side, I make it darker, and I'm not so sure why I did that, but I wish I hadn't done that. The foreground was really busy, and so this was definitely a challenge to try to suggest all these weeds and the snow laying on top of them. And I think that's one of the tricky passages, and so that was one of the reasons I wanted to draw this again. The second time I drew it really detailed. I drew all those out. I don't think I even got to it because I just stopped the painting because I wasn't happy, with where it was going. So it's just looking and bouncing around now. This is a little bit of warm. There's some weeds back there that have kind of an orangish cast, and here's the reflection. So I like that, and I like that. I should have stopped right there, but no, or maybe there, but I just, for some reason, hit it again and make it darker. It's fine, it's every watercolor that I do, and of course that I'm sure that you guys do. See, like, I don't think I needed all that to get that much darker, but anyhow, you're always going to find places that, a wash you don't like, or a mark that you don't like. And sometimes it's fine and nobody else would notice it but you, as the artist. And then other times it's just too much, and it's just going to bother me, so I have to fix it. And so in this painting, there were a few little spots that afterwards, because I'm like, as I'm doing the video, I'm just like, really into it. I'm not getting back from the painting. I have everything taped down. I'm not going to lift the painting, put it up on an easel, and walk away from it. I mean, I could, but then I have to reset the video and stuff. And so, so here's the gouache, just a little bit, just a little bit on top. This is titanium white gouache. I think it's Da Vinci is the brand. And just, just enough. I usually use gouache in almost every painting, just as little accents and stuff. And I think that's just kind of the right balance I was trying for, just a little bit of that. And gouache, if it's a little bit liquidy, is going to dry darker. So when you first put it on, it looks really light, and then it dries a little bit darker. And now it's kind of the end game here, and it's just putting in details, textures, and this little rabbit ears that are sticking up there. That's a perfect example. I'm so glad I saw that and got it out of there, because I mean, it just really was not good. So sometimes when that little detail brush is flipping around and stuff, you can't you don't see all the little marks that you're making. So this is it. This is the painting. Signature goes on. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you again.